What is up? What week is it, Braden? Week 6, right? Week 6. Welcome back. I'm so happy. Everybody clap, please. Woo! Welcome to RIT-Sec. Announcements. Join the Discord. You know the vibes. I think everybody in here's in the Discord. Pretty sure they are. Thank you, Mr. Malik. Join the Discord. Please sign in. Is the sign in up? Okay. The sign in should be coming up oh so soon. Oh so soon. Okay. The sign in is up. Sign in, please, so you can get free pizza. All right. Check the calendar. Please check the calendar. Calendar.ritsec.club. That's how you know when we're doing events. Yeah. Also, join our mailing list. Sarah sends out her weekly sweet updates. And they're great. And then you know it's happening. It's so fun. Okay. Hockey update. RIT Psych is going to the hockey game this Friday. That's today. I know, I was going to get there. Anthony, yeah. Ticket sales through RIT Psych have passed. If you still want to come, you can get general admission tickets. And then come with us. Because that's so fun. You can be with friends with similar interests in security. Okay, meet in the club room at 5:45 EST. Albie will be there waiting for you. We can all go in a big huddle and be friends and be kind to each other and enjoy a great game of hockey. All right. Meet the sponsors. Clap it up. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Okay. Keep going. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We're so back. Okay, please stop now. Follow our social media. Sophia makes sweet posts on there. And you should like them and repost them and share them with your friends and family so then everybody knows what RIT-Sec is. Because caring is sharing. Or is it sharing is caring? Sharing is caring. Okay. Week 3 pinned. Okay, so it's not week 3. I didn't put that there. It's not week 3. Smash, did you do that? Okay, you did this. It is not week 3. But we're doing pin testing today with Sartok, aka Smash 8-Tap, aka one of the smartest guys I know. Everybody give Smash a round of applause. Why would I know I did not put that there.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Let's talk about pen testing or penetration testing. So who am I? I am Sarthak or Smash, as you might have known. I am the RWAP interest group lead. We meet every Tuesday at 5:30 in the NetSec lab. And I'm a second year master's student, hopefully going to graduate this summer. And my current security interests are penetration testing, of course. That's why I'm here giving this talk. Then I also like red teaming. What's the difference? We'll get to that. I also like DevSecOps. Why? Because you need to know. I always like to say that, but you need to know how things work and how to build them before you can break them. And that's what the goal of penetration test is. So if you want to learn how to build, go to Mondays on Ops with Mr. Malik. My offensive security experiences are CPTC. I recently was the team captain of CPTC 23 team. And I also recently got my OSCP. And talking to my professional experience, I have been a web security engineer in New York Life Insurance last summer. And currently I'm working at Akamai as a security engineer. So let's dive into it. What is penetration testing? So it's a security audit where testers attempt to find and exploit vulnerabilities in a target. So it's like it could be like a monthly thing, or it could be for compliance thing that a company gets or hires penetration testers, people like you, and ask you to break into their network, break into their company, and in a secure way, obviously, and then find vulnerabilities, hack whatever you can in their company, and then create a professional report, we're going to get more into all of these stages. But the main goal is to find the weaknesses before the bad guys do and report it to the company so they can be better prepared against these attacks if they ever happen in the future. This also, I forgot to mention, this could, or I already mentioned, it could also be because of compliance issues. So when you hear penetration testing, you might hear all these terms. Sorry about the quality of this image, but I'm going to walk through it. You might hear about about vulnerability analysis, pen testing, assume compromise testing, red team exercise, and purple team exercise. There might be more stuff, but these are the main general terms when you will be hearing of when you go into pen testing world. So starting from bottom, it's a low. So why this triangle? This triangle means things at the bottom are low complexity and low interaction with the client or with the target. And as you go up, it gets more complex and it's more interactive. Starting off with vulnerability analysis. So with vulnerability analysis, you are basically just running some sort of scans to find vulnerable components in your system. You're not really actually exploiting them. You're just finding them based on the versions that might be vulnerable and that might be already accessible. The data about vulnerabilities is already out there in the world, and you're just throwing the scan and checking if the version that your company is running is vulnerable or not. So you're just comparing those two and then reporting back to the target or to the company saying we found these assets which were running old versions, so you better update them. And you might also tell them these are the critical ones, these are the high ones, and so on. Moving on to network penetration testing. So this is the one that I would be talking about in this presentation. This is when you are actively not only scanning the target, but you're also trying to exploit the target. And you could be detected by the blue team of the company or the SOC people, which are actively monitoring the network connections and all the stuff that you're doing, but they won't really tell you anything or they won't ask you to stop or anything. It's just because you are on a you're hired to do that, so you just keep doing whatever you're doing. The next one is assume compromise testing. This is when you are given an access already inside the system, inside the infra. You are, let's say you got access, you will be given access to a client's laptop, let's say. And starting from there, you will start to pivot around and see what else can you hack. Because in the security world, it's always better to assume that you're already compromised than not to assume that. So once you assume that, this is where assume compromise testing comes in. This is just one step after penetration testing, because in penetration testing, you are viewing the company from outside. You're just looking at or you are starting from outside. You're given the IP addresses range of the target, and then you're trying to get into the systems. So the next one is red team exercise. This is more highly skilled. So the goal of red team exercise is to obviously get into the system, hack all you can, but also you have to be as quiet as possible, as stealthy as possible. So you have to pretend that you're an actual attacker, what an actual attacker would do. So it will try to cover its tracks. It will try to do, let's say they get a shell onto the system. They're not going to just dump the SAM database, which is where Windows stores password hashes, because that would just create alerts and it would be so easy to detect them. So the whole point of red team exercise is to be stealthy and get into the system and pretend to be like an actual attacker. This is actually more fun. And if you want to learn more about red team, we do have red team recruiting meetings on Thursdays, I guess. So go to that. After that, we have purple team exercises. So this is when red team exercise or red team joins in hands with blue team. So this is when red team is getting into the system and blue team is actively talking back to the red team and telling, we found you here, you should do something better. It's like a very highly complex environment, and it's also very fun if you are actually doing a purple team exercise. But basically the difference is you are working with the blue team, with the SOC team, and It's just an exercise to check or to see the defenses that a company has while applying um, red team exercise onto the company's infrastructure. So moving on to the next slide, we have penetration testing execution standard. So if you're trying to be a penetration tester, you cannot just start hacking. You have to follow some methodology or build your own methodology. And if you're just starting, following this would be a very good place. But once you're seasoned and once you know what you're doing, you can just build your own methodology. But this is the one which is famous, which is out there, which is what we're going to be talking about. So these are all the stages that a penetration test comprises of, starting with the pre-engagement. Let's see what that is. So in pre-engagement, this is when you have been contacted by the company and you're just starting to do some paperwork. So you start off by defining the scope. The scope is the IP addresses and all the systems that you're allowed to hack into. And then you also identify the stakeholders. That means, let's say I found a vulnerability on a web application. Who should I contact to? Who is the stakeholder? Who is the person who is responsible for that part of the infrastructure? The next one is rules of engagement. It's kind of similar like scope, but it also tells you what you are not authorized or not allowed to do. So let's say you're not allowed to touch some piece of equipment which is really sensitive or which could just break the operations of the company. So you define that. Then you also agree on the legal and ethical considerations. So this is just, I think, a piece of paper which gives you the legal permission to hack into someone's system. The next one is establish a communication channel. This is really important because let's say you do get into legal trouble. So who should be your first point of contact? You should always know that, because penetration test does not just involves network penetration test. It also involves sometimes physical penetration testing or social engineering. So if you're trying to get into someone's building physically and some cop just looks at you and see what the hell are you doing, so you should know who you should contact at that point, or you should have that legal agreement paper on you. And then also determine the budget, because you're always doing these things for money, right? You're just selling your skill. So you should determine the budget and the timeline. So let's talk about enumeration. So this is the next step. After you have done with all the paperwork, you're started engaging with the client. So now the first step is to enumerate the target. So why do we enumerate the target? First of all, you cannot really hack into someone's network if you don't know what they're running and what kind of online internet presence they have. So this is a stage where you do that. You try to identify the target, what kind of services they are running, um, um, what kind of data they might be already leaking on the internet. And especially when it comes to passive enumeration, you're not touching the target in terms of network connections. You're not making any active network connections to the target. You are just looking on Google. You're trying to interact with their, let's say, website that is perfectly legal. Anything which is publicly accessible and available, you're doing that in this stage. You're trying to look in the archive information. So let's say they're running a website and you go to this nice little website called Wayback Machine to see if they might be exposing any information there 2 months ago or 2 years ago. So that's where archive information comes in. Index information. So you go to Google and you just type in the name of the company and see what shows up, and you just keep digging into it. This also comprises of OSINT. So let's say you find some managers and other people's name from their website. Now, the next step you would do is you would try to find them on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and see what kind of information they might be leaking, which might be helpful for further stages of your pen test. This might be useful. So let's say you found a web developer on LinkedIn, and from there you found his GitHub, and then you started looking into his GitHub, and you might find some sensitive password or keys or some sort of information that will really help you in your later stages. So you see how important this step is. You might have missed out on so much of critical information if you just went ahead and started doing an Nmap scan and just started pawning their company. This also makes you a valuable penetration tester because these all things that you find are gonna go into the report at the end, and they will be impressed by you and they might invite you again for another pen test. So what kind of information you can find? I briefly touched upon it, but you can find physical information. You can just go onto the Google Maps. So let's say you are on a physical pen test. You're trying to break into the company's buildings. You don't even have to physically go there. Nowadays, we just have all of this stuff online available, right? You just go to Google Maps and just check around the building corners and see how many cameras they have and what kind of vehicles they might be having already there. You might get just so much information about the company just by going online and going to Google Maps. You can also find human resources organization charts using Google Dorking. I don't think I have Google Dorking here, but Google Dorking is basically when you're looking up a specific company on Google using specific search query patterns. So what you can do is, let's say you are going to a company, let's say, or let's just take an example of ridsec.club. You're trying to find ridsec.club presence on Google. You can obviously type ridsec.club, but you would also see some results based on Facebook or Google or Twitter. You can do some kind of filtering, some advanced filtering with Google Dorking. You can start by typing site and colon, and you can just give ridsec.club. And that will filter all the results and give you only results based on the domain ridsec.club. You can do much more advanced stuff. If you just look up Google hacking database on Google, you will find all those queries and some crazy stuff there. Let's see. We have talked all about that. Let's move on to next slide. We have passive enumeration tools. So what kind of passive enumeration tools you can use? There are frameworks that you can use. There's a really nice framework called OSINT framework, which it looks like this. And it's not clear here, but you can right now just go to the OSINT framework and see what it offers. But it basically offers you ability to look into, so let's say you have an email address. What kind of information can you get from email? Let's say you have someone's LinkedIn. What can you do with that? So there's this framework which might help you do more OSINT related stuff. It can also help you with looking up someone's address, and from just the address you can find their the owner of the address in some cases, and you can just keep digging around. It just helps you a lot. There's also this tool called Maltigo, which helps you organize all the OSINT data that you have found. So it gives you can place everything in the Maltigo, and it will just give you a nice graph kind of structure. Let's say you find an organization. Under that organization, there are a couple of people that you found, and within those people, you find much more information. So it might get a lot really fast and really quick. So if you want to organize that stuff, you can use Maltigo. There might be more tools available, but Maltigo is open source, and on GitHub you can just use it. Ghunt. So this is the tool that I came across really recently. It's a Google hunting tool. This is really scary. So what you can do is you can enter in someone's Gmail address, and using that Gmail address, you can find what kind of YouTube accounts that might be associated with this Gmail address, what other Gmail address might be associated with this particular Gmail address. It's basically you can do all sort of OSINT with just by a Gmail account. You can do with this Ghunt. So it's pretty cool. You guys should check out. So next you can look at is search engines. I already talked about Google Dorking, the Google hacking database. The link is there. You can just go right there. And specific to a nation or a region, you can use different kind of search engines to get more specific results. So if you're just looking at a company in China, you can use Baidu, or you can just research upon what search engines a particular country uses and use that instead of just Google to get more targeted results. Then there's this thing called Shodan. So Shodan So Shodan Shodan stores the data from all over the internet if it's connected to the internet, and it's just freely available to you. You don't have to run any kind of scans, any kind of service scans. You don't have to even touch the target. You can just go to Shodan, and Shodan has indexed everything that is touching to the internet, right from servers to maybe toilet seats, because everything is connected to the internet these days, right? You can find that here. If you know how to use it, there's like advanced queries just like Google Dorking. You can use some filtering in Shodan, and you can do a lot of OSINT there as well. And one cool feature that Shodan also gives you, also just to mention that since you all are a student, you get a free account with Shodan. Otherwise, I think it's paid, but you can just get a free account with RIT email if you use it. But the cool thing that I was talking about with Shodan is right now, if you, let's say you find a port 80 on some server open, it also lists out the vulnerabilities that the server might be vulnerable to. So see, you're not even touching the target, and all this information is just sitting on the internet for someone like you to just go in there and find it. So moving on to next is active enumeration. So now we are moving on to the next stage. Now we are actually touching the target. Now we are making the requests. We are making the network connections. And these requests might be valid request, malform request, or a lot of requests that involves brute forcing. So based on a valid request or a malform request, you can find different kind of stuff. So there's a tool called Nmap, which helps you do that. So Nmap is basically tries to find open ports and services on a, if you provide it an IP address. So it's going to create a connection. So your connection would be locked. So just to make sure you guys know that, you cannot just go ahead and start doing Nmap on Google.com if they have a bug. If they have a bug bounty, you can do that. But just so you know that if you use any of these tools mentioned in active enumeration, they are making connections. Everything that you do might be logged and connected back to you. But some of the tools that I like to use are Nmap, again, a port scanner. It can find ports and services. It can also do much more stuff. If you want to learn more about that, come to our web. I don't think, oh, I do have some stuff. Okay. There's another tool called SMB client, which looks at one specific service, which is the Samba service on Windows, or SMB service on Windows, and Open Samba on Linux. But you can enumerate Samba service using SMB client. Also, you can use CrackMap exec. It's literally a coded tool. You can do so much stuff just with CrackMap exec, right from enumerating server SMB shares to running commands on the system to dumping the database, right just from one tool. There's also other tools you can use for Samba related stuff. There's LDAP search and SMB map. All of these are just enumeration tools that you should know about if you're going into pen testing world. But let's talk about Nmap. So this is going to be mostly your starting point after you're done with the pre-engagement and passive enumeration. When you're trying to see what kind of services someone is running, you'll start off with Nmap and giving it a list of IP addresses. So starting from left, the -T3, this defines the timing or the speed that you want to go. So if you're touching someone's network, you might want to go slow. If it's just for a CTF or a hack the box or something, nobody cares. But if you're doing it in an actual environment, you should go slow. You should start off with T2 or maybe go to T1, so lower is slower. Then you are doing a SV, which looks at the service is running and tries to find the version of the specific service. So let's say someone is running an Apache server, which is a web server. It will also try to find the version of that server. With SU, you can do a UDP scan. You can also specify TCP scan. I hope by this week of RITSEC, you all know the difference between TCP and UDP. Then -PN here stands for no ping. So that means even if you don't, so the way Nmap works is it tries to first ping the target and also tries to connect to the port 80. So it does these two things. So if either of these two things, it gets a negative results, it says the device is just down. but you can force it. So in some cases, let's say in Windows, by default, the ping is disabled. So if you try to Nmap a Windows machine, Nmap might say it just is down because it's not able to ping it. Neither it can find a open port 80. You can disable that by just giving it a -pn. Then you are specifying a port that you want to scan. So you can do -p and just give the port number or range. It can have a lot of other data that you can enter in here. Then at the end you have not at the end. We have -sc. So SC is running the default scripts that Nmap has. It tries to look at the OS version, not by default though. By default, I think it tries to get the version of each service that you have found. So right now we are just looking at port 80. It tries to go one step beyond, and I think it tries to dump more data from the found service. That's what -sc does. And then -il, it just looks at it just gets the IP address list. So L just stands for list or input list. So you can give it a text file of list of IP addresses that you want to scan, and it will just start scanning each of the IP in this list. So active enumeration, as I said, you have to be careful. Some things can be sensitive, especially if it's an IoT device. So if you're trying to do some kind of IoT hacking or IoT penetration testing, those devices are really low powered and they don't have much RAM and much CPU power. So you might just crash them if you're running Nmap with -t5 because you cannot wait to get a scan over. You just want to do it fast. But just be careful when you're trying to see what kind of target you are approaching and what kind of target you are trying to pen test. Exploitation. So this is the phase which all the hackers and all the pen testers and maybe all of you would like to receive a shell. This is where you exploit a target and you get a shell back, and you have basically remote code execution, and you can be as cool as you want, and you can tell, hey, I popped your machine and I have a shell. I'm so cool, blah, blah, blah. So exploitation, it can be external. I don't like that animation. So external, so most of the time external exploitation means there's some service which is accessible externally, which means it's exposed to internet, or it is accessible to you when you're doing a pen test. It most likely would be web application. So you're trying to get into someone's web application by by looking at the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So OWASP top 10 defines the top 10 exploited vulnerabilities of each year. So you can find that on Google, OWASP top 10 2023. I don't think it's out yet. 2022 would be out. Externally, you can also do as phishing. So you can send someone a phishing email with some kind of embedded malicious word link or some kind of image or a binary or a Trojan. You can send someone that and get a shell back. And so this is really interesting. There might be some servers that the company just forgot about, but it is still connected to their infrastructure and also accessible to you. Once you get into that, and you might just be able to get into using default credentials because no one is really securing them because company just forgot about it. That's why enumeration phase is really important. You should know all the IP addresses and all the assets someone is running on their infrastructure. So once you know that, you would not miss the forgotten servers. And once you have that, you can use maybe default credentials, or maybe it's just very old and you can use some publicly available exploit, throw at it, and you can get a shell. Internal. So internal exploitation means you already have a shell or you're already into the environment, and then you're trying to see what else can be exploited within the network. So once you're inside the network, for most of the time, it would get easier for you to go around the system because people think we are behind a firewall, we are behind a VPN, who can get us? So let's just use password as password 123. Who cares? Because this thing is behind the firewall, but you somehow bypass the firewall, and now you are trying to see what is what kind of applications are running inside the application. And the first thing you should always try to do is use the default credentials or use some kind of password word list, which is like the common used passwords, and try to just throw around the network environment, and you might just get lucky. So this involves password spraying. So password spraying means you found one valid password for some user, and now you're using that password against all the systems available in your infrastructure. So you're not brute forcing. You're just using one single password against all the infrastructure. This is also safer than password brute forcing because you won't be locking someone out because you're just using the password once against a particular system or a particular account. There could be hash cracking, all of these stuff, Kerberoasting, Astra roasting. I don't have the time right now to explain them, but you can basically dump the hashes from systems, and then you can extract passwords out of them, or crack the hash and get the password out of them. Or there's also techniques like pass the hash, where you can just use the hash and just pass it around the service. And because Windows is built the way it is, we love Windows, but you can just pass the hash and just log into someone's system if you just have the hash. So it doesn't matter if your password was strong or really really strong. If you had the hash, you could just log into someone's system under specific conditions. You can also do man in the middle attack. So again, this is very specific to Windows. I'm not going to dive into it. There's also misconfigurations that you might find on Windows. So one interesting misconfiguration that Microsoft did was to use a password for, I don't actually remember the service, but I don't know, maybe Kenny knows it. But there was a password which was posted by Microsoft on their docs, which they were using internally as the default password for one of their services. And if you know that service password, you can just get into the service. So next step is to pivot around. So post exploitation. So you have gained access to someone's system. What's the next step? Again, to move around the system and try to find or try to exploit as much as you can, because they're paying you to find vulnerabilities in their environment, and you have to make sure that you're thorough doing that. So this would include pivoting. Pivoting means you're moving from one target system to another target system by making use of some weaknesses. This could be weak credentials. This could be SSH keys that you found on the compromised system. One thing that will really help you is tunneling and proxying, because most of the time, once you have access to one of the system internal to a company, that would be most likely be behind a firewall. So next, to move on to the next system, which is again inside the company, you have to have some kind of channel or tunnel to the first compromised system, which will let you move to the next system. This is what you would learn, or you would do using tunneling or proxying. And again, if you want to learn more about these things, come to our web, because we'll be learning more. Specifically, tunneling and proxying we'll be learning this semester. Also, once you have access to a system, you would first see if do you have the highest level of privileges on that system? Are you root in case of Linux, or are you administrator in case of Windows, or not? So if not, you would try to escalate your privileges to highest possible, which is root or administrator. You can abuse things like SUID binaries, misconfigurations, or maybe kernel exploits to escalate to your privileges. Moving on to next. So you found all the possible ways someone would hack into a target. And what should you do next? You just back up and write a report and just be done? No. You should do cleanup. So when you were on a pen test, you might have created a lot of files or a lot of open connections. You might be using some kind of a C2 channel, a command and control channel to establish persistence of some sort. So you have to make sure you are removing those persistence, because if not, that might be a way for an actual attacker to get into their infrastructure, and that is not good, right? The whole point is to make their system, make their infrastructure more secure, and you are just leaving it in a bad or worse place than it was already. So you should make sure you are killing all the shells. Any files that you created should be removed. Although you should not be really creating files on someone's infrastructure unless it's really, really important. Also, any files that you took from the infrastructure, you have to make sure it does not have any sensitive information. Let's say, for an example, you found a file called creditcards.txt, juicy, right? Let's just download the first few lines of the file and just take it onto my computer. No, you cannot do that. Why? The reason being, that company was following compliance related to credit cards. Let's say PCI. So they were sure that they are compliant to that standard, the PCI standard. But is your system compliant to PCI? Are you securely, safely storing all that data? If you can prove that to them, sure, you can download the first 10 10 lines of the credit cards. But if not, you should definitely not download that file. If you did it accidentally, it just happened. But if it was surely you saw credit cards.txt, what else can it be there, right? You should not do that. So that moves us into the last phase of our pen test, which is the reporting. So pen test is not just about being cool and getting shells and hacking into someone's system. You have to communicate it to the infrastructure or to the company that you were hired for, to tell them these were the things that I found. These were the things that you need to fix, because this is what they are paying you for, not to get shells and anything. Because if you cannot really tell them the issue or the impact a particular vulnerability has on their business operations, they would not like you, and they will not probably hire you again. So you have to explain what you found and why is it important to them and how you can fix it. You have to be professional, and so report is not your diary, so you have to make the report look really, really nice. And leave your emotion and ego out. It's not about you, it's about your client. So don't do that. So you can mention stuff like, it was so easy to get into your system. I was able to just throw this exploit and I got into your web server. They can take it personally. They would, because they might be having a security program for last 10 years and they are making so hard to secure their system, and you just come into one day and within 1 month you were able to get into their system. Yeah, you're really good, but you cannot be cocky about it, or you should not be cocky about it. It's about the client. You are hired to help the client, and clients will remember how you made them feel. So here's the report structure. You should always start with an executive summary. This is the summary that high-level executives would read on. This should have clearly stated the impact on their business, directly onto their business. So because most likely the executive people are there, or they're reading the report to invest money in their security infrastructure wherever it's needed. So you have to make sure that that idea is coming out clearly in your executive summary, so they know where exactly they need to put money, because that's all they care. They're not going to go ahead and harden a SSH box or anything. They're just there to put money, and they need to know where they need to put money and why they need to put the money, if it's really important or not. So next should be project overview and the methodology that you used. Then there can be some metrics about how many vulnerabilities that you found. Then there could be a finding summary. So if someone is just reading very high level, all the findings that you had, all the high level findings, or just maybe an overview of the findings that you had that you might have seen in the environment. So let's say they are using default credentials or weak credentials everywhere. That could be something you should put in your findings summary. And also you should put a remediation summary. So just summarize how they should remediate this finding. Could as easy as following NIST guidelines and making sure the password is over 10 characters or 14 characters or whatever the standard is right now. Give some statistics, and then you can actually deep dive into findings. You can, so this is the section which a technical person would be looking at. So if let's say someone from their SOC team, they would come here and they would see, okay, you found some vulnerability, how did you found it, and how am I supposed to fix it? So you have to be as technical as possible in this section. You should mention what is the impact, what the vulnerability was, and how they can fix it. Again, quick note, don't use words like it was so easy to get into your system and it's very easy to fix it. No, it's not. They have a very complex environment and they might have been working on their environment for so long. So just boil it down and make sure the words that you're using in your report are not really pissing them off. Don't assume client's infrastructure. Don't just assume that they might be compliant or they might not be compliant to something. Ask them questions. So you know if they are compliant or not, and then you can put that into your report. And one more note, if you're providing them remediation steps, provide them a lot of multiple remediation steps possible that you know or that you can think of or that you can research about, so they can just look at your report and they don't have to go anywhere, and your report is more valuable than going on to Google for them. So if you want to learn more, obviously come to RVAPT on Tuesdays. The fourth time I'm mentioning that. Join the Discord channel if you already haven't. And you can also talk to any of the CPTC members. So this CPTC is the collegiate penetration testing competition. I think there's like 2 people or 3, including me here. If you want to know more about it, just talk to one of us. I think it's me, Max, and Kiri here. And I think there will be tryouts for next season. I'm not sure. You have to talk to Professor Rob Olson about it. But one way you can improve upon your skills is getting certifications. So whatever you learn in classes or wherever you're learning from, if you go for a certification, the learning is very specific and targeted, and you can learn skills really, really fast. And also it looks very good on your resume because hiring people know you are really invested into this specific field. Doesn't have to be penetration testing, whatever field you like. If you like blue teaming, cloud security, whatever, get some sort of certifications before you graduate. It's going to really help you for your future jobs. There's some certifications that I thought would be worth mentioning for this talk. There's OSCP by Offensive Security, which is the people who created Kali Linux, if you know what that is. Then there's one called ECPPT, which is a little bit easier, or yeah, it's way more easier than OSCP. And there's this one, which is really recent. I think it's like 2 months that it got released, the one by Hack the Box. And from what I have heard from the friends and people who are working on this, it's actually supposed to be more harder than OSCP. And OSCP, if you guys don't know, it's like the industry standard that everyone just likes to have people working in penetration testing field. And it's really well recognized right now, OSCP. But CPTS is the one if you want to deep dive into penetration testing. I was looking at the course structure, and it does seems like it has more content than OSCP would be offering. So it really depends on you where you want to go. But in my opinion, if you're just starting, either of the first and the third is probably not for you unless you're willing to spend like 6 months or something just learning about these, because they go in really depth. And if you're just starting, you might just be discouraged and you might think penetration testing is not for me. You should go for eLearn Security. They have junior penetration testing and other certifications for penetration testers, and they are easy and They also have course structure, so they teach you about penetration testing from scratch and what you can expect in the exam for the certifications. So again, just to reiterate, if you're just getting started, go for eLearn Security, in my opinion. And if you are somewhere in mid, you can go for OSCP or CPTS. Okay, that brings us to last slide. Any questions? The credits to this is to Kenny. Thanks for putting that. Hmm? Oh, yeah. I don't think so. Do they do that? Do they so the question is, do department do anything to finance certifications? No. You have to pay yourself or get your employer to pay for it, unfortunately. Or if you see, it's really worth it because it's mostly like less than any certification that you go for is mostly like less than $2,000. Max should be $2,000, and unless you're going crazy and going for SANS, which you should not as a student. But mostly it should be less than $2,000. And if you look at what you're paying at RIT, it's like probably like $1 or $2,000 per credit. So you can make the choice. Any other questions? If not, we can call it a day then here.